topics. My name is Hedda. I'm a library assistant here at the Phoenix Public Library, and also am a part of the Startup Phoenix team, which is a space at Burton Bar Central that provides resources and support for entrepreneurs. Each of our programs in this series will be a unique set of panel members representing a wide range of creative fields. Tonight we have 4 panel members with us who will share their experiences navigating self-doubt as creatives doing business. First, we'll go over a few things to help you navigate WebEx. You should see towards the bottom of your screen a hand if you'd like to verbally ask a question. You can also use emojis, but please keep your mic off for the duration of the program, as well as your video. Please use the chat feature as much as possible to ask questions. And also you see the button to leave a meeting if you need to. If you're having audio issues, it may just be that your speaker volume is low. So just be sure to adjust your speaker settings first and ensure that your audio device is properly and securely plugged in. If you still can't hear, you can use your phone to call in for audio. So you'll have that option down at the bottom of your screen. That information will also be in the email that you received from the registration. And before we get started, I'll go ahead and introduce our wonderful panel members tonight. First, we have Eric Torres, and he is a graphic designer, illustrator, writer, and printmaker who emphasizes that design is about meaning, purpose, and intent. He is also passionate about how creativity holds the potential to add meaning in our lives and bring good into the world. In addition to being a full-time design director, he produces otherworldly stories, games, and other creations in small batches offered in his Etsy shop under the name Eric Imagines. And next, we have Halley Willcox. She is a performance artist, choreographer, and the director of Methods of Madness Dance Theater, an outlet for her creative work, which ranges from experimental minimalism with a sense of adventure to placemaking rooted in community building through movement exploration. She is inspired by curiosity, legacy, preservation, memory, nature, and binoculars. Halley also works as a faculty associate at Arizona State University and Grand Canyon University, as well as teaching workshops regionally and internationally. And we have Kenaim Al-Shatti. Kenaim creates abstract, ultra-saturated digital visuals that are featured in live stage productions and art installations. His work ranges from moving images in large-scale immersive environments to still illustrations and GIFs. Kenaim is also part of the experimental music group GLOB, producing audiovisuals that make use of old and new technologies. And we have Janel Garza. She's a visual artist and designer whose geometric abstract style is expressed in a multitude of forms, including paintings, large-scale murals, and delicate wooden jewelry. She is inspired by the surrounding Sonoran Desert, her passion for medicinal plant studies, and the clean, orderly shapes found in modernist architecture. Her work can be found at the Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art, Practical Art, and other local galleries, while her murals adorn many buildings in the Phoenix metro area. So I want to give a warm welcome to our panel members. Thank you so much for being here. Oh, and I think everyone is muted, so let me fix that.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
There we go.
Hello.
And before we jump into our discussion, I thought it'd be great if each one of you could share some current project you're working on, or a recent one, or an upcoming creative work that you have going, just to give everyone a better idea of what kind of work you do. Eric, if you could start.
Hi, sure. So, hello everyone. So, my name's Eric, as had mentioned. Um, Currently, I've been taking actually a class, business of illustration class, because I work on small personal projects that I try to bring to life, basically making my portfolio into products. And one of them is a little game called Bug Ruckus. It's for two players, and I am trying to learn how to be a better business guy. So part of that is learning from others, and currently I'm in a learning mode and trying to instill some knowledge from others who've had experience that I haven't. So yeah, that's currently what I'm working on. It's a little learning and a little making.
Thank you. And Haley?
Hi. Hi, everybody. I'm Haley. I'm the director of Methods of Madness Dance Theater. I'm currently working on like a long extended evening length piece. It's about 40 minutes long. The title of the work is called A Rose for You, and it's about love and self-love. And what stages are we in? I don't know. I think it's like mid-end stages. We're going on tour to Marfa, Texas in like 2 weeks. So, but that it won't be finished. It'll be an iteration of it. So kind of ending this project a little bit and presenting it now.
That's great. Thank you. And Kenaim?
So right now, I am working on continually being a better illustrator. Um, I'm working on myself, and realistically, I go through phases where I have uh, projects that are like, let's say, concert type projects, and then I have phases where it's more R&D. So I'm in a R&D development, research development kind of phase right now, so that when the next big project comes, I jump into it really quickly. And I don't know. I don't know if everyone else finds this, but seem to like compact all of my creativity for myself into these kinds of time spans. And then when I have to work, just flows out to shoot them off really quickly. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm compiling.
Awesome. Thank you. And Janelle?
Hi.
Hi.
So right now, what I'm working on is what takes up a lot of my time these days is murals. So mostly like residential murals. I'm working on one this weekend actually. I'm doing a mural in someone's backyard. And then I'm preparing to put together a solo show for practical art, as well as working on a series that I've been mentally developing for the last couple years, but it's intimidating and I haven't actually physically put any paint to canvas for that yet, but it's in the works.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, it's actually a good segue into the first question I wanted to ask you all. And by the way, I won't go through each of you, in order for the questions. Just volunteer answers as you'd like, and don't feel like you have to answer every question. But first, I wanted to ask about self-doubt in the creative process. So is there a stage where you feel the most doubt, like in getting started, or in the actual execution? And if so, how has that kind of developed over time in your personal practice? Kind of a big question. So take your time answering it. So yeah, if anyone wants to jump in, feel free.
I'll start.
Yeah.
So a lot of the work that I do is made up of commission projects. So I'm making something specifically for a client. And that I tend to have more of a difficult time with self-doubt in those because it's not just what I want to work on in my vision. I'm trying to make sure that my client is happy and that I'm able to fulfill the vision that they have, or they're not sure what the vision is. So I think for me, the scariest part or the hardest part is getting started a lot of the time. And sometimes I just feel really stuck And what I'll do is I'll just go and like try and sketch up whatever and like get bad sketches out of the way and not have a lot of expectations for like the first round of designs that I do. And usually if I don't put too much pressure on that first round, then I'll start flowing a little bit and then I can get designs out that I'm happier with. But yeah, that's usually the scariest part for me is getting started with those.
Yeah, I can go next. I really identify with what Janelle's saying. I think self-doubt shows up for me where it's like I know there's a project I really am excited to start, but I'm nervous to start it for some reason. I don't know if anyone else experiences that, but it's that whole intimidation factor of like, okay, now I gotta get into this, and is it gonna be good? Am I gonna find enjoyment with it? And that really shows up in a lot of personal stuff for me, personal projects that I'd like to do. And I think sometimes when it's for clients, part of us is like there's a necessity to get something done so like we can kind of get pushed into it quicker. But yeah, it shows up for me sometimes a lot in my personal work.
Yeah, so it definitely sounds like getting started is the big hurdle typically. Maybe once you get into it, it's not, you know, don't feel as much hesitation.
I would also maybe add to this that, I think that a lot of us are probably working on lots of different projects at once, right? So there's things that are a 2 out of 10 effort, and there are things that are a 10 out of 10 effort, and it's all coming from the same place, but there's different expectations that come with those things. So I think that the idea that client work really, that you should be able at some point within your creative career where really client work is the only thing that's giving you pause. And really that is just, you can't deal with the unexpected of somebody just saying, oh, I don't like this or don't like that, right? I think that within your own personal work, it seems like, I don't know, self-doubt doesn't play that much of an issue for me in my creative work. It plays more of an issue for me within my own work by me saying, hey, is this the best use of my time? These are when the self-doubt things creep in, which is, okay, I can do this thing. Let's say you just do it well. Let's say you do it 100% every single time. Then what are you really spending your time doing? And then it becomes more of am I getting lost in essence playing the video game being my creativity and my time span in my life? Am I getting carried away with that? Am I spending too much time drawing? Am I spending too much time in front of my computer? Those kinds of things that are, because the actual self-doubt within the work, at least in my experience, I've kind of overpowered whatever that, I give myself veto power over whatever that is, to just say, no, it's, it, it's not the work itself that would be good or not good. It's, am I doing it for any kind of real reason other than it's a pattern that I've started that I can't get out of? So this is where the self-doubt comes from me, is this how you want to be spending all of your time?
Yeah, and about like, kind of debating how to spend your time, that kind of moves into question of like how do you, work with your inner critic. So being like critical of your work, but not to the point where it's too much. Is there a balance that you feel like you've reached where you can give yourself like constructive criticism, um, but also not to the point where it's like hindering your progress?
Yeah, I mean, and I'll start off with this one. I think that you don't really get any, you're not going to really see your work for what it is. And so you have time under your belt that you've been away from it. So the idea that you need to be so hard on yourselves and getting to that place, again, ideally, you should have your own bar that is way above what anyone else is going to even want out of you. And if you hit your own bar, then you get to that place, right? And then if you get to that place and you've hit your own bar and you still dig more, then that to me is it could be perfectionism, but it's also a little bit of just it's interesting to have tunnel vision and be obsessed about ideas and to iterate on them in lots of different ways. It's just to do that month after month after month on the same thing is probably unhealthy. Whereas if you gave yourself a time frame, like client work is an easier way to think about this, because if you have 3 weeks to do something, you get it done in a week, and you spend the next 2 weeks making iterations on that, that's completely fine. And it's almost like it's helpful to remember that this obsession can actually lead to other results or other experimentation or any of this kind of stuff. So again, it's almost like for me, it's just not even worrying about just go, just go. Just go, 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 go. Everything's the same, whether it's a illustration or a spray paint on the wall or something that took forever to render and is so delicate and precise and all these kinds of things. It's all coming from the same place. So, but as long as you don't have any barrier for that, you can go as long as you
Yeah, great insight. Thank you. Anyone else want to tackle the inner critic, how you've balanced that in your work?
I have one. I would say about the inner critic, I think it's easier for me to talk about this with other people than with myself. But like we're all friends with lots of artists, and whenever I like hear my friends giving themselves a hard time, I always or like hear one of my friends giving themselves a hard time, I always think like, don't talk about my friend like that. I'm like, don't talk about my friend like that. And I also try and think about that with myself as well. So but I think that like in some ways a lot of us are like, our inner critic kind of drives us in some way. But I mean I think that critic it's both like a blessing and a curse in a way, that it's something that it's what's like weeding out yes and no's, but it's also the thing that's it's kind of like helping drive where you're going without letting it get you down too much. So
Yeah, that's an excellent point. The thing that's driving you, I think about, I'm the employee and I'm the boss. And so my inner critic
yeah.
can only go so far because my boss needs me to get the stuff done.
Yeah.
And sometimes having like those limitations, like you were saying, it kind of helps you shut it down because you have to, I
Because
guess.
it's not real. It's, regardless of even if it is real, let's say I'm just making something that's trash. It's like, it's still this ephemeral thing that is not real life and real death. A lot of things just need to get done, especially if it's client work, just needs to get done. You need to move on to the next thing. You need to have a bounty of work under your belt before you can even be considered decent at something. So it's like these ideas of like, you're never gonna get it right. It just doesn't matter. It just doesn't,
Yeah.
it's always going to be less than what you thought, and those pieces will probably be more than what you could have dreamed of to begin with. So
Yeah, some things require very deep personal and emotional investments of us, and then other things they just to kind of mirror what you're saying, Kenaim, they require us to just don't worry about being inspired, do it. And sometimes that we're forced as creatives or business people or creators of lots of kinds to really listen to the inner critic that's the bureaucrat, the one that's saying to us like, you don't have to be motivated, inspired. You have to just get this done to accomplish or meet a need or a bill, so that happens, and I think in those cases, it's okay to be led a little bit towards a logical place where we get to.
Thank you. Those are awesome, awesome feedback. And are there any specific other ways you've helped ease some of that like self-doubt, like any like personal practices or like specific tools that have helped you along the way, or even specific beliefs?
If I'm really struggling with something like that, a lot of times doing just like free writing helps me get out of my own head or move past whatever doubts I'm having and just kind of get over it. So that's like a specific tool that I've used. It's just writing down all the thoughts I'm having, writing down the really hypercritical things, and then, you just keep writing until you get past it.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Like having a clear connection with your own thoughts and emotions, as at least in how they relate to what you feel about a situation, or what you're going through, and being able to pen to paper, just put those things down, does help. It's like self-therapy, to get past whatever those roadblocks are, because it just boils down to, again, you have to trick yourself to do the thing, no matter what the thing is. So yeah, writing is an excellent feature.
For me, getting out of self-doubt, one of the things that I find is really healthy is like getting out of myself. So like going to see someone else's work that's inspiring, which could range from like listening to a podcast that I think is like artfully crafted, or going to an art museum or seeing music. But I think that like getting out of myself and then using that as inspiration sometimes can be helpful to knock it out.
Sure.
Yeah, I think for me, there's going to be a few moments after this time we spend together where I'm going to think back to what we all talk about here, and it's going to really give me an infusion of motivation, because just knowing, that there's other folks like Haley mentions that are out there, bringing good into the world or doing their best, and it really helps, because at the worst end, we can end up bullying ourselves about what we're not accomplishing yet or where we'd like to be. But the positive end, it's realizing that we're part of a collective of people that's all trying to do, great work and bring things to other people to share. So I think having this dialogue and this forum together, and our visitors here who are taking time to be with us and ask questions too, like, it's really encouraging. And I think that's a big plus for me.
And I did also want to ask everyone about how having that sense of community can help. Did anyone else have any inputs on that?
100%. Yeah, I mean that's reality. We're all in our little holes making all of this stuff, and getting away from that and being with human beings. I mean, it's incredibly helpful that you're around other people that do similar things. At least the processes for them might be similar, so that you can bounce, you know, reality checks off of each other, but without stepping outside of place and just having human interaction. I don't really, what are we really creating to begin with? We can get into real years-long mires of just not communicating with the outside. So I don't know. It it's beyond self-help to just get out of the space and go talk go talk with other people, to have adult friends, to constantly be meeting people, to just open yourself up to the community, wherever.
I think it's really helpful just knowing that other people go through the same doubts and problems as you. It's just, I don't know, it kind of is consoling to know that you're not the only one going through those things. Also, obviously, you get inspired by what your friends are working on, and just kind of like feeding off that energy. I was talking to a couple other artists earlier and talking about the shows that they're putting up for First Friday tomorrow. And it's just a really nice energy to be around, and it just kind of keeps you motivated and keeps you going.
Yeah, thank you. Um, and how do you feel about taking on projects that are kind of outside your comfort zone? So are you kind of aware of, what your limits are, or you don't really use that term, you want to always push yourself? Do you enjoy challenging yourself with different kinds of projects, or do you kind of go through phases where you will work on, similar work and then take on something, more difficult?
So I've had a couple of opportunities kind of show up for me that I hadn't necessarily like been planning for, but they were a little outside of the scope of what I had done before. A big one being the mural that I did at Smoka. I hadn't really done any murals up until that point. I'd done like a couple of small ones. I did one in my mom's backyard. But then they invited me to do that, and that was like a really amazing opportunity. But it was also really intimidating because it was going to be a mural at a museum. But I just kind of like dove in and was really excited. I think a big thing that helped with that too was that it was supposed to originally only be a year long. So if I did a bad job, it wouldn't have lasted too long. I think that was a little insurance they put in there too. But yeah, I think it just like being excited about stuff and knowing that you'll probably make some mistakes and you'll learn a lot from that. Other jobs that I've done that have been outside of what I'd been working on before, I learned so much. And so just being willing to make mistakes and go from there. And it just keeps making you a better artist when you can do that.
Mhm. Yeah.
I can speak on this a little bit. You know, I'm a dance artist and I've done like a fair amount of like dance and arts technology with like on the body sensors, and then worked with like theater companies and old and young populations. And I think that like everything you do informs what you're going to do next, and it just kind of all compiles together to help draw you forward. But I think there's kind of like seasons to this, at least for me personally, where there's time where I have more time to like kind of like diffuse and like do more broadening, and then there's other times where I think I'm like really focusing on things a little bit more clearly. I think I'm in a focusing phase currently. But I would say like the past few years were like very like broad commissions, which was amazing. And it's totally given me new things to work with now. And so it's interesting to like start to like, for me at least, how they kind of modulate, like to feel that I might be open to like saying yes to some of these opportunities. And then also, like you were saying, I think it's important to like evaluate those opportunities too, because sometimes it can be just exciting to say like, oh, I want to do this. But we also know that like there's a lot of like within those opportunities, there's like a lot of costs to some degree that can sometimes be really great, and then sometimes can be really challenging, and it just depends on like your bandwidth and avoiding burnout, like a combination of like, do I have the space to give this what it needs?
Yeah, and I think the one liberating thing can be to at least view some of like when we have to go out of our comfort zone. I've tried to think of it more of like experiments. So there's not such high stakes because I can fall in. We might talk about more about perfectionism, but I fall in that pit a lot sometimes. And what's the only real thing that's helped me is to view a lot of these things as experiments. They may work, they may not, they may be a great thing, they might be just a good thing, and sometimes that's awesome. And the times where I've been able to just focus on treating things as experiments, it does take some of that stress away and helps you to just have fun with it. I like to tell a story about being kind of almost thrown into the pool to learn how to swim when I was a kid. And while that was terrifying, and I don't think that's a great way to teach kids how to swim, now it's kind of this little metaphor come back to is I kind of felt thrown into the pool on that project, but I was glad that I survived and I might have learned a few things about it along the way. And so I think it's telling ourselves there can be something real beneficial for going out of our comfort zone a little and to try it, see what happens. We got to try.
Thank you. And
Yeah,
was
and
there,
you know, I actually have one thing to piggyback off of what Haley said. I really do also believe in seasons for all this stuff, you know. So a season for building and then a season for showing off. Really, at the end of the day, the things that are outside of your grasp or scary, those are the things you want to be doing, right? Like you want to be playing in the championship game. You want an opportunity to do your best. And the things that are outside of your reach are things that usually include a lot more disciplines than just your own, right? They are things that are big team projects. You are a small, even if you're a vital component, you're a small component of this thing. And there's some amount of being able to relax when stakes are so high, because the spotlight isn't just on you. You just need to perform at a really high level, right? So I don't know. I always take the idea that if you're doing right now what you did 10 years ago as an artist, right? This and maybe you like what that is, but that to me is stifling. I want to always be expanding so that I get different opportunities that are outside of what I could conceive for myself, because maybe what I can conceive for myself is relatively limited. But if I'm somebody that's known as somebody to get it done, whatever it is, then more things come to me, right? So I'm primarily a video artist, right? But let's say somebody randomly needs me to control lighting in a stadium, right? It's like, I don't know how to do that, but I'll take that on because that's like super interesting to just like figure out, even if it's really scary. And it's like, what is being scared? You know, being scared is being dropped out of a plane with no parachute. That's not what this is. You know, your worst day at work, as long as no one is injured, you know what I mean, isn't going to be that bad. It's really not. So I don't know, like run towards it. Just run towards whatever that thing is. This is like, otherwise it's your own status quo, which is deafening.
Yeah, changing up the perspective, it's really important. And how do you guys like define success, like when you're working on a project? Like, how do you kind of, keep motivating yourself? Like, do you kind of celebrate, yourself along the way? Do you usually hold off until the end, or kind of encourage yourself, to keep going? Or do you define success in a particular way?
You know, for me, success on things that are a little more tangible, like let's say like a bigger project, is almost going off of what we just said. It's going through that barrier that you didn't think that you were going to be able to go through, right? So it's being on the other side of a project saying, oh wow, I just did that in 2 weeks. I just did that in a month. I just did this in a year, but it took me things that I didn't even know a year ago to get me to this place, and now I'm on the other side of it. So to me, that's success. Everything else is just, you know, the actual artistry or the visual output is neither here nor there.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, that just kind of getting on the other side of what you're working on, for me, that is successful because I have a vision and now I have to go through all of these steps to realize it. And there are a lot of steps, you know, there and it changes while you're doing it. So once I get to the other side of that, I am really patting myself on the back. And, you know, if it's a wine night, then there's a glass of wine. If it's a bike day, then it's a walk around something. If it's a spend time looking at, you know, a show on YouTube that I didn't give myself time to before because I was really staying focused. But it's just getting on the other side for me.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa.
You're welcome.
And if any other attendees, if you have a question or comment, feel free, you can unmute yourself or put it in the chat too. We'll definitely incorporate your question.
Yeah, and I think part of the success when I'm done with something, or at least when I'm trying to or reaching kind of the deepest parts of what I might be working on, one of the good things that I'll try to take away is just if I am, as we talked about a little bit earlier, Kenaim mentioned connection, and we've talked a little about community, is just like that feeling of like, oh, I met someone that I want to keep in contact with, or I met someone that really challenged me or helped me to see what I was doing in a new way. You know, I think we're here to grow primarily, and I do think some of these projects, the success factor, a big one is the relationships we build with one or two or three people. You know, it doesn't have to be many, but they can really, you know, raise the quality of our work and really help us to grow.
Thank you.
I have one more thing to say about that. It's a little different because like a dancer and a choreographer specifically, a lot of your like practice is like so group oriented. But I would say like for me, there's a lot of ways success exists. So like I feel like my answer today is different than tomorrow, but I think that it's definitely like a daily thing. And for me, success has a lot to do with showing up and doing it. So that has to do with like studio time for me and to some degree discipline. Because sometimes studio time is me like laying on the floor for 30 minutes and then writing in my journal for 15. But but some days it's all work, you know. But I think that for me, like really the showing up is important, regularly and consistently. And then like also additionally, success is like those moments when you're in like for me at least, when I'm in the making process or in any stage of the process really, and there's like just it's like that Tetris moment when like the last piece goes and it's like and all the things drop out and you're like, yes, there's like a level of like a click that happens, and it's kind of hard to define, but it feels like a lot of choices that came together to like do something special. It's, you know, it's that like it's that magic. So I think that's the combination of those two, but I feel like they really exist together. So like you do have to lay on your studio floor sometime for like total hours laid on the studio floor, 7 for this project. Dancing hours, 27. Laying on the floor, 7, you know. So it's all part of it.
For sure. Thank you. And also I wanted to ask you all if you had, rather than in the creative process, but self-doubt when you're taking your work to an audience or when you're selling the work itself. Does self-doubt show up then, like when you see people viewing it or experiencing it, or is that usually, you know, one of the most rewarding parts? Or even if you feel conflicting feelings about sometimes selling your creativity, you could say.
So for me, yes. Yeah, I mean, when I, you know, I had a show in September, and, you know, you have the opening and you hope people show up and you hope that people enjoy what you've made and, you know, receive it well and hopefully see something in it. So there's that part, you know, you want people to enjoy the work that you're making and that you're putting all your energy and your love into. But I think a way to get past that, or a way to like deal with that, is just to make sure that you're putting out the best work that you can. So me, like, knowing that I am really happy with the pieces that I made. And if other people don't receive it that way, you know, it's unfortunate, but at the same time, like, I just have to know that I did work that I'm happy with and that I am proud to share with the world. So that's kind of how I get past that.
Prior
Yeah, that's huge.
to, sorry, Eric.
Oh,
wait.
go ahead, Teresa. Go ahead.
So now I'm creating greeting cards. I'm creating cards of various types with my own photography, and sometimes it's a blank card, and sometimes I'll have something witty or what I think is witty inside. But prior to doing this, I worked with my husband, who's a guitar player, and I was the singer. And what happened during that time, we did that together for 10 years, was that it became apparent to me that when I was singing or my husband playing, you couldn't please everybody. You were in the public eye, you were out there, but people have different tastes. They just have they're different. We're different. Like, I don't like every singer that I see, despite the fact that I understand all of what they had to do to get to that moment, to stand, you know, in front and do that job. And I'm certainly not appreciative of every voice and every song and every this and every that. But I was that person, and I realized that you just are never going to please everybody all the time, though you are bringing your A game. And so I believe that I was able to put it in perspective, that it's really not personal. What Janelle said, you're bringing what you have and you're comfortable with that. That's what it's about, because it's going to appeal to those people who it resonates with. You're not going to sway somebody who doesn't like those colors. They can't stand orange. They don't like cats, like whatever is happening there, or they don't like ballet, or whatever is happening. You're not gonna sway them, and you can't be concerned about that. And that's what I learned as I was standing in front of people a couple of times a week, exposed, but still needed to be present and do my job and not be affected by them. Because then the thing that I said in my head was, look, the restaurant owner asked us to come here and is paying us to be here. So the person who counts, the bottom line counts, that's fine. That's fine. And it was never, I would never have, like the New York Times music critic didn't show up. So I wasn't, just jacked up in the paper. It would always be, two people sitting over there or a person over there. And it would also be a thing where it wasn't all the time. And so that kind of helped me, kind of just resolve that issue for myself.
Teresa, like, is I feel very similar to what you described, and I think that the thing that all of us as creative people have to get over is ultimately indifference. It's not about people disliking your work, because that's just another side of the same coin of somebody liking it. It's still, so if he dislikes your work, it's still art. You know what I mean? That's some kind of visceral reaction, them disliking your work. And what Janelle was saying, like, as long as you're okay with your work, that's okay. But the reality is the world is indifferent to your work, right? So it's like, once you get past that point to even a small degree, then you're safe. If you got people like your stuff, you got people hate your stuff, it's fine. It's all good, because you're getting some kind of reaction. And if you get the right reaction, you can continue on the path in a way that helps your life, right? You can take some of that feedback, and the things that are real about whatever somebody says about your work, because you feel them, and the things that are BS about it because you see that it is like, oh, you don't like the color orange, or you don't like cats, or whatever the thing is that's irrelevant, right? So I think that we all, as creative people, we have to really just be honest with ourselves and realize that our best is still going to fall on deaf ears, and that's fine. That's totally okay.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Nat. Go ahead, Haley.
I mean, I'm also just gonna say that, like, I also think about this a lot, like for both myself and like also in the artist community too, because like we were all saying how we all navigate self-doubt in a lot of different ways. But I think about it in terms of myself, but in terms of like the way I want to support my like friends and fellow artists and community members. So like I think that thinking about self-doubt makes me think about how I really think it's important to like give people words of affirmation and shout people out and like share love because it's hard out here and not everybody likes everything you're doing. And I think that that's like really important and can help. It can be something really small. I was doing this dance show and it was a silly performance at like a park for children, and it was like an afternoon show, and we'd done 3 of them, and then like I ran off stage, and this little girl like ran from the like field and like grabbed my leg and was like, "That was so good," and I was like, "This is it." So it's like, you know, it's like that was my affirmation that I needed for like 6 months. You know, so sometimes like it's even just saying something really kind to somebody can be really helpful to like help them push themselves to the next space. So
Yeah, I did exhibit for a while at Phoenix Comic Con for about 10 years. I exhibited there and would take our little wares and show them, and we had great connections with people, and it was such a fun time. Was I able to compete with, the mass, big brand, huge studio work that is there? No, but that's not what I was there. It's really interesting because when you try to take any of your work into a commercial space, because part of our discussion today revolves around business, as an artist, you can be, and this happened to me, I was very sheepish about talking about the monetary value of what I was producing because I felt like it on a level cheapened it. But at the same time, it was necessary in order to start growing and to actually treat my studio as a business space where I was able to get things done. And one of the best bits of feedback I had around, being conflicted about selling yourself or your products or your work was that to a lot of people, you may not have an impact, but to 1 or 2 people, you will be the best thing they've ever seen. And they will really, really want to be along for the journey and support you and be part of that journey. And that's encouraging when you run into those opportunities as an artist, to connect with people, not just as patrons or supporters, but as fellow creatives, as many of us have as our audience, our fellow creatives. So it's really awesome that way. And it can be helpful in trying to promote yourself a bit.
And does anyone have any other thoughts on like the actual selling, like asking for money for your work? Like Eric was talking about how doubt can come in creeping in at that time too.
Yeah, I've got a thing that I always do, and it's just like a personal challenge that you, as a person that is self-employed, you need to figure out how you start making a more secure living, because I think all of us probably start out willing to do whatever for a small amount of money, underselling ourselves to some degree, and then we have to work forward on bettering that. And I think that instead of going wild and trying to charge people money that they don't even begin to have for things, like a good rule of thumb I've always done is whatever I got paid last time for the job that I'm doing now, that's basically going to be maybe more or less the same job. I'll write out what that number is. So let's say that that number is $20, right? Okay, this thing is going to cost you $20. And then right before I hit send on the thing, just bump that up 50%, bump that up 60%, bump that up 70%, because you need to figure out where people are. And a lot of the times doing commission work, at least for me, at least historically, maybe not so much anymore, but historically people are a little guarded with what they want to spend on a thing for a creative, right? So it's this game of going back and forth of like, hey, like, let me know what your budget is, this and that, because ultimately you don't want to call somebody's bluff. You want to get paid. They don't understand that you're willing to work for less than what you should, because that's just where you are in your own space. So it's like, we're always going to undervalue ourselves. I'm always going to think that $1,000 is a lot, that $10,000 is a lot, that 20,000, like that, all these things, even if that's what the price of the thing is, I'm always going to think that's a lot. So I need a trigger within myself to just make me a little bit mad, make like a madman kind of, like I'm a little crazy. So I just, okay, this is going to be $20 before I hit send. Let's make it $40, right? And so the worst that somebody's going to come back with is, hey, I don't have that. I've only got, a nickel to spend on this. And then you can make a real decision about something. But you have to get to a place of realizing that you're not a car salesman. If somebody's coming to you, they want your work. If they can't afford your work with where that you're at, maybe they can in the future. And if you feel like doing something because you like whatever that relationship is, or you like that whatever that interaction is, then the ball's in your court. But it's, I don't know, for me at least historically, it's been a it's been a place of breaking myself down only to build myself up as the real author and the real person that knows what things should be worth, and just letting people know, because people don't know what things should be worth, you know. I'm sure, Eric, I'm sure if somebody asks you to design some random thing for themselves, I'm sure they're thinking it's way less than it actually should be, right? So it's like I hate the phrase train clients, but you just have to explain to human beings what things cost. Like that's it. And if people don't want to deal with that, then that's great, because they were going to be a hassle to begin with. You know, they weren't serious to begin with.
Yeah, pricing is tricky. It's been a work in progress for me. I've been selling my work in some capacity for probably about 10 years now. And it's just been kind of like feeling it out, getting to learn like the market for the kind of work that I do. And as I get better and more efficient, and as my portfolio grows, I charge more. When clients contact me about doing murals specifically, I have a range that I will quote someone, you know, depending on the specifics of the project, it's going to fall between here and here. And I've gotten to a place where, you know, maybe I could charge more to that person or maybe less, but I kind of have to like have a price point where I'm comfortable with it and kind of like leave it in their court at that point. So I have a lot of times when people will reach out to me, I'll give them a quote and I just don't hear from people again, but that's okay. So you want to make sure that you're working with clients. I mean, unlike specifically the client base end of it, you want to make sure you're working with people that are happy to and willing to pay you what you need to be satisfied, because you don't want to end up being bitter about doing this work that ends up being really difficult or ends up having all these weird challenges that you didn't expect, and you feel like you didn't end up making enough in the end. So you have to kind of find where that place is for yourself. But yeah, it's a work in progress.
I have a statement about this too. I mean, with dance, pricing is really complicated. This in our field, it's always complicated. But I would say for me, I have kind of like standard prices for things, and they also like, you know, increase over time. But then also, I think for me, it has to do with like both reading the room and the opportunity. If it's like a big institution that I know has money, I'm going to ask them for it. If it's like another local nonprofit that I'm working with, maybe it's a different rate. Plus, we also add alternate economies, which I think are like really great ways of sharing resources, then where you can count things for in kind for each other. Like you have a friend make your poster, but you do some like movement clips for them for their social or something like that. So I think like exchanges can be really helpful in addition to that, but I think it has to do with me a lot like of where it's coming from, who I'm charging in that moment. And then obviously like as like you progress, like as time's gone by, like there's some things that I'm like, I think that if it's like below, either below or even like above my like capabilities or price point, I like have I have like a list of go-to people that I'm like, hey, I can't do it for this cost, but these people are great and they are available, and maybe they just graduated or maybe they're in just a different space where it'd be a really good building opportunity for them. So I think it's like, for me, it's a combination of reading the space for the price, deciding if there's like alternate economies or in-kind forms that we could do to also like navigate price, and then also like if this isn't for me, who can I help or who can I give this to?
Yeah, that's great, and I think that speaks, Haley, to like working with our clients a little bit and trying to be easy to do business with. And one of the things I was going to mention about this topic, it's an important one for artists because no one really does good creative work for the money. They're doing it because there's something internal. They have to do it. It's part of who they are. But when we can think about it in terms of putting a value on our time, it gets a little easier. One person asked me once with a specific project I was working on, do you know if there's a market for this? And I had to respond, no. How do I know if there's a market for some of this stuff? Because it's coming from a place of enjoyment, and it's coming from, as Janelle mentioned, it's coming from us internally, like what we enjoy making. And I think if you can do that and then establish like and show your joy about what you're doing, that right there is what can be infectious. It means a lot to people these days, especially to see when someone really is excited about the work they're doing. And I think it can be a real powerful social tool as well, to understanding that, for the artist who is an artist, doesn't just like the idea of being an artist, there is something, that you're getting back that goes beyond just the dollar figure too. Practically, I think another thing you can do is just look for ways to build value in what you're providing. So if it's XYZ, what can I add in there for this particular client that I can see they may need later on? Um, and that right there is another thing that will keep people coming back to you as a creative, in terms of, wow, this person wasn't just concerned about writing the check or getting the transaction done. They were thinking about and anticipating some of the things I might need later on. I do a lot of graphic design and illustration work, which that's a transaction. It's a business transaction. But building value into some of those projects has really led to more opportunities later.
Yeah, great insights. Thank you. And kind of going back to, when you're bringing your work to an audience, have you ever experienced, receiving kind of more critical feedback, not necessarily negative? Hopefully no one's too mean, but how do you kind of make use of that, or disregard it, or just use it kind of constructively?
I have a real, it's not like hard and fast rule, but does are the people I'm working with, do they have a billing department? They have the billing department, then I need to like take this feedback seriously, because I need to do well the project so that I keep them as a client. To Eric's point earlier, like I need these relationships to work out, because one-off projects are not what you're really after. You're after continual work with like-minded clients. Um, yeah, that's
So critiques, as far as like a lot of times with commission work, and not everybody does it the same way, but for me personally, I always come to my client with the mock-up of the design I'm going to do for them, and I make sure that they approve it before I make it, because you don't want to put all this time and energy into doing a mural or whatever your project is, and then at the end they're like, actually I want to change this. So I always make sure that I have like the approval and that they're happy with it. And so sometimes I'll share the design with them, and they'll be like, well, sometimes they just want a little tweak here and there, and sometimes they want a totally different design. And I think for me, even if I presented them something that I absolutely love, it's really important for me to make sure that they're happy as well, because this is something that they're going to be living with. So it's not something that I have around in my home or whatever. So I think keeping that in mind, but also not being unfaithful to yourself on the work that you're doing. So you never want to, there's a lot of stuff that I'll turn down because people want me to do work that I just don't do. It's not the style that I do. And so a lot of times I'll suggest other artists if it seems like that's not going to work out. But it's just kind of like meeting in the middle sometimes and making sure that everyone is satisfied with it. And if you don't feel like you can get to that place with that client, then kind of excusing yourself from there politely. And, I don't ever try and burn any bridges, but just kind of knowing what point you're going to go to with the criticisms.
Yeah, and in game design, we run into this a lot when we do user testing. So that's where a lot of the critiques can come in. And game design as a discipline, it shares a lot with environmental design or industrial design, fashion design, because you're taking like rules and math and measurement and all these other factors into play. But the different thing about game design is it has to equal fun in the end. That's so subjective. So one of the things we'll often do is just it really teaches us to ask questions about what we're producing and getting feedback from people. Sometimes people want your game to be another game, or a new version of a game that they've played before. And so you have to filter that out and really look at like how does an experience make someone feel and how are they interacting with other people? And I think it really is about amending and changing the things to help show you're listening to those critiques and that feedback so that you can demonstrate inclusiveness, diversity, all those things in the feedback, and then filter out any of those things that can sometimes be a little more superficial and do it graciously, but at the same time, stay true to what your vision is so you can, end up with something that really truly is you and you can own it as your work. So that's one quick example.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, I mean, I think that a lot of what we're all saying too is just you have to, you co- you are responsible for coming to the table with your own set of expectations. You are responsible for letting other people know what those expectations are, just as they are responsible for letting you know what theirs are. And hopefully, like Janelle said, you're getting on the same page before you're really putting in too much work. You need to be there has to be a point in your career where you are not doing spec work on the off chance that somebody wants what you made. You need to be at a place where somebody's coming to you because of your history, because of your catalog of work. And what they really want is just your best effort with this idea, whatever the idea is. So, it's some of that is you're going to always be the master of whether that's right or wrong for some projects, and sometimes you're going to be beholden to multiple levels of weird politicking or corporations or committees or like whatever, and you just have to realize that you're part of that process. And hopefully you have enough to juggle around so that you are not constantly feeling like you're giving your best but having to change it 90% to fit someone else's thing. And but that like Janelle said, that this is a personal responsibility of not taking whatever's offered at you, but taking the things that you feel are right.
I have something to share. I think feedback's really interesting. I co-teach a class at ASU with Liz Lehrman, so we use critical response process a lot. So I'm literally talking about feedback at my job constantly, and it's great. But I think it's interesting because like our whole lives we're just given feedback about all kinds of things about like how to stay in your lane when you're driving, or like what's appropriate to wear in these certain spaces, or when your art's bad or it's good. And I think that a lot of it for me has to do with whenever I get feedback that like really rubs me the wrong way, usually, or like that doesn't happen very often. There's only been a couple times where it's like put me in the back seat for a week. And I'm like, wow, I really let it get to me. But I would say that a lot of the time it has to do with I put it on myself a little bit. I'm like, I don't know if I asked the right question. And I think like for me, like it makes me I'm constantly thinking about this as like an artist and a maker, that I need to be aware of like what I need. And so I'm like, what am I curious about? Like what's drawing you out? What's like what kind of questions can I ask that are like interesting questions that can like help create answers that are both open and hopefully helpful. But I think that, and I'm just like so interested in feedback from anybody. I'm asking anybody, like my next door neighbor. I'm like making a piece about, I'm like it's about self-love, and I'm like, Audrey, how do you feel about self-love? Like it's like it becomes everyone. It's like a gas in my life. So I think that I think it's really important to like to get the broad spectrum of the feedback. I have this thing called the Carol, like it's like a litmus test. My Aunt Carol, who's not really like an arts person, so I'll like ask her about things and send it to her as like my sample test because it'll helps me with accessibility. So I think that there's like ways that you can play into the difference, or you can and like let it be an opportunity to help you. So yeah.
Great, thank you. And kind of speaking to when if you were talking about, when you're doing commission work and they, what they're really wanting is something else, that you don't usually do. Do you ever fall into like a kind of comparison trap, with other creatives, or have you kind of learned to, like you kind of mentioned, Haley, like stay in your lane, kind of just focus on what you're doing, and has that, changed over time?
I always think that I'm the one that knows what I want to be doing, right? So if somebody comes to me with a thing that's out of line, this is a thing that internally I can feel. But if somebody comes to me with something that is, maybe it's not something that I've done, but it's, oh, that's interesting. It's like, do you have optimism, and can you be tunnel vision enough to do a great job on a project? And you just be like super honest with yourself about those things, and it's you're rarely going to steer yourself wrong. So
And I think that there's room for everybody in every field. And so that's the thing that keeps me from doing the comparison.
Definitely, thank you.
Yeah, I think the thing with comparison is there's a couple other artists that do work that's similar to mine, and I do find myself comparing myself to them. But I think you have to remember, as much as a cliche as it is, that your work specifically and your perspective, what you bring to the table, is always going to be a little bit different than anybody else's, and you just have to do what you do to the best of your ability, and not I think it really shows up if you are trying to make your work look like someone else's. So I think genuine work is always going to be better and always going to feel better than if you imitate really well.
yeah, and really, like, that's a matter of what what is your purpose for doing these things that we're doing, right? Because if your purpose is just growing as an artist, some of these things almost to me become irrelevant because I'm too focused on the thing that I'm doing, right? So a lot of the other stuff kind of falls by the wayside when when I'm not worried about what next door neighbor is doing, because I don't even see what next door neighbor is doing, because I'm too focused on what I'm doing. And that anyone is doing anything is great. And we have to remember as creative people that there's not a limited amount of opportunities. There's basically zero opportunities, and we're all creating our own paths for ourselves, right? So that's an infinite number of opportunities. So if somebody's right here doing something that's relatively similar to what I'm doing, that's okay. There's been hundreds of thousands of painters in the world, right, over the past few centuries. So, but that doesn't diminish if I feel like painting. I have to compare myself to a litany of history at that point. It's I think when those things pop up for me, it's it's telling that I need to work on myself a little bit, because it's the wrong target. Like, my dartboard is off somewhere when I'm throwing my darts at that thing of comparison.
Yeah, and kind of a big question I wanted to ask. So how has taking a more unconventional path, as a creative, caused you to feel, self-doubt? Like some of us might have, been raised in families where there were other creative people, some weren't. How, growing up as an artist, um, and venturing on this path that's, kind of uncharted, um, how have you navigated that overall?
choosing to, was it Picasso who said we're all born artists? I think maybe, but choosing to stay an artist is kind of a whole other thing. And it's hard in this world, as Haley mentioned. It is tough out here. Keeping the juices flowing, understanding your place in society, weighing, what's important in the world versus, I look at some of the things I'm doodling and drawing, and I'm like, I have to accept this is a lot of nonsense to a great degree. But I think at the end of the day, like trying to remain true to what we're doing, understanding that like our role in our community is a small one. We're part of a broader community, and someone mentioned earlier, helping others shine, is a key part of this. I think growing up as an artist, I was watching. I might be a little older than some of you here, but I grew up on Sesame Street and Electric Company and the Muppets and all these this kind of renaissance at that time of practical effects in movies and all these things that took a lot of time and craft to do. And it really left a dent in my little head about what it took to make things. And in a world where AI is becoming the new thing, I do sometimes feel self-doubt about my role as an artist and what, especially in as a illustrator and a visual artist, because I don't know where technology will take the world. But I do think at the end of the day, it's really about, when someone holds a piece of your work, did they get your best in that work for them, and feeling good about that? Because I think AI is very prolific, but at the same time, I don't know many people are going to look back and be like, look at all these AI things I bought, or look at all these AI, images I have. They might remember the one thing, that Kenaim did for them. And that was the thing that really defined, a part of their life and made a memory. So I think that's something I feel about that, at least.
Heather, could you repeat the question?
Oh, sure. So I was just wondering how, your path as an artist, it's known to be, more unconventional. And along the way, it could cause you to feel self-doubt. And so how you've navigated that, even from a young age to now.
No, for me, I had to come to grips with the reality of what I'm doing is outside of what people around me are doing. There's not necessarily a clear path to where I want to go. I can't necessarily even articulate, besides some amount of stability, I can't articulate where it is I'm trying to end up. So it's almost like you have to give yourself license to be a little crazy. You have to give yourself license to have it not figured out. Unless you are born into something, uh, we are just entrepreneurs trying to make this thing work. And every entrepreneur is going to basically start with zero, I guess, unless you're born into something. So you're always going to be a crazy person when you are unproven. And you just have to be okay with whatever that is. You have to, Eric, you talked about community. I more so than, I want to make great art and I want this and I want that. Like I have to be somebody that says what they're going to do and then does that thing. And then I have to continually be that person so that is the effect that I have, more so than the art has to be just behind me, and it has to just be like the glow of the roughness of my reality. And it has to be, I'm somebody who's going to do this thing, follow it through, figure out the next thing. And I think that once you do a certain amount of that, people see that. People see whatever they assume is success. Success with art is such an abstract thing because people are just going to pick and choose what they think is successful from what you've done. But hopefully you do enough that it's a more unquestioned thing. Like, yeah, the art's fine, but this is somebody who is honest to themselves about what they need to do and follows through so that they can be counted on. I mean, that to me is like, you boil all these things down and it becomes less about the tenderness of the artistic expression and more about what are you willing to do in the face of chaos that we're all that we're all like dealing with. Are you willing to just do it every day? And I don't mean to grind it and work so hard and this and that, but are you just willing to lay the brick every single day? Just put it there, put it there, put it there. Because sooner or later, you're running by yourself, and there's not a whole lot of people that can tell you one thing or another about it. The world just accepts it, just like I accept that this place next to me is owned by whoever it's owned by. I can accept that because it's in front of me. So you give yourself a little license to be a little crazy and not have to live up to other people's expectations at the beginning while you're trying to work that through. At least that's my experience.
So I grew up in my household. My mom was an elementary school art teacher, and so she was very supportive and encouraging as far as my creative life. I was like her guinea pig. I would do her lesson plans for her before she would do them with the other kids. So I was really like lucky to be nurtured in that way creatively. But I also kind of had this idea instilled in me from her, of all people, that you can't really be an artist, like a studio artist, as a living. And I think she got that idea from her dad. And so when I was growing up, that was never my plan to be an artist, a full-time artist, anything like that. I actually studied Western herbalism, so like plant medicine. And then when I moved to downtown Phoenix, I started showing some work in group shows because I was painting, because I felt compelled to paint and make work. And it just kind of snowballed from there. I started making more and more work. And it was never the plan to end up where I am now, but I just kind of kept following opportunities. And, I really enjoyed doing the work. And luckily, and this is not the case for everyone, but luckily it was able to work out. But I think there was just like following that feeling of needing to make work, enjoying making work. And it's been an unusual road for sure, but I think as long as what you're doing feels right, I think being able to listen to that intuition, that part of yourself, is really important. I don't remember the other part of the question, but
I think that's good. Thank you.
Okay.
That's beautiful.
I can chime in just a little bit about that
Oh,
too.
sure.
I think that, I mean, it's so interesting to think about like what role models that we have as children, or like, like if like I didn't know any doctors, or and I also didn't really know any artists, but I'm here. But I think like for me really is that like the things that were like probably modeled for me in like a really um I think direct way, but was like hard work and like finding solutions in situations that were like that had minimal resources. So I like grew up with like a single mom, and my mom cleaned houses, and like so I saw her like work really hard and like make stuff happen that I was like, wow, I could tell it was challenging. And so it like I feel, and then also like I think that really watching that, it's like, oh, I feel like, single moms are so creative. But so like it's interesting because there's not like a lot of role models in that way, and you like learn about these big artists, but you don't really like, at that time I didn't know a lot about like how, you don't really know like what it was like in the inner workings until you start like reading more and learning more about it. But I feel like a lot of the path is really, the thing that I both the blessing and the curse is that it's both it's like liberating and beautiful, but it's also like dark and like unpaved. And so it's like, you're really getting to make your own decisions about where you want to go. But at the same time, it's like I feel like all of us probably feel like our job titles don't really exist. but we're all like, I in some way, because like, you know, we do everything for yourself. You're a marketer, you're a business person, you're also the artist. So it's like so many different things in one, like an arts entrepreneur, for lack of a better word. But I also think that it's very liberating, because, you know, there's a lot of, with that also, I have like the freedom to be able to say, I'm going to make like more focused work, or I'm going to do something more broad, and I'm going to do commissions, versus like times when I've worked in big systematic things where you have an idea and you want to implement something and it takes 3 years for it to roll out. So it's nice to be able to, like, in real time, be able to make decisions about the way that you choose happiness every day. So
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you. And I think we have time for one last question. Since this is the library, I just wanted to ask if anyone has any good book recommendations on creativity, the creative process, or just anything that has inspired you that maybe you've read lately, or even not even a book, an audiobook, podcast, just something that has kind of helped you along the creative path in a literary way.
A
I can
couple of them. I don't know who that was. Go ahead, Eric. You go.
I can start at least. And this is not an ad. I don't know James Victoria. I met him once. The book it's called Feck Perfection. So it's a provocative title, but I would say this book, it's a small book, it's a quick read, but it has been hugely influential because I am a perfectionist by trade. That's what I started with, my main weakness, and it's really helped me with that. James he's a graphic designer who grew up in New York primarily. He grew his body of work in New York as a poster designer. So I recommend that. I think it's just a great way of boiling down a lot of the challenges we run into as creatives.
Awesome. I will make sure our library has that.
A couple of months ago, I retackled the Rubik's Cube and swore that this was going to be the time that I was going to, you know, just figure out follow the algorithms and memorize them. And I just swore this was going to happen. And in that journey, which of course I did not, okay, I could just get like the first line, just so you guys know that. But in choosing that, I took a book out by the Rubik's Cube creator. I cannot, oh, his name is Rubik. That's his name. And it was a book that he wrote about himself. Not, of course, it included parts of the cube and the creation and stuff like that, but it was such a comprehensive piece about, for me, creativity and not knowing. He had no idea where this was going to go. He had absolutely no idea. And somewhere where, you know, it had the downfall and things of that nature, but just kind of going on that journey. And it was well enough written. And it wasn't a long book either. That inspired me, or and keeps me inspired.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Teresa, there's a movie on Netflix about like Rubik's Cube people that are doing them really fast. I highly recommend it.
I saw those people, and that's a whole different breed, right? Like he
whole
had
world out there.
no idea. And I think that's the thing, like at this point in the game, when I read the book, because the Rubik's Cube comes out, if I remember correctly, in the 80s, if I remember correctly. And I was younger. And people were doing it, and I certainly tried and got nowhere, and went on with my life. And then I tried again, maybe in my, I don't know, late 20s or something. And I didn't get it. And at that time we didn't have the internet. You talked to somebody and they told you the algorithms. So now here we are. The Rubik's Cube has just evolved, the entire thing. And just reading his story, because he doesn't talk necessarily about that. He just tells his story, and we can see the story now. And we also know that there's a continual future for it, because it has taken the world
Mhm.
by storm. And I believe the guy was from Poland or something, maybe not Poland, but an Eastern European country.
I'm reading. I'm listening to, I listen to a lot of audiobooks and podcasts when I'm working on stuff. But I'm listening to Art is Life by Jerry Saltz right now. And he is an art critic. And it's taking me a bit to get through. It's really dense. But it's kind of broken up into his critiques of different exhibits, and just kind of talking about the art world in general. And so like I said earlier, I studied herbal medicine when I was younger, and my bookshelf is mostly herbal medicine books. I don't have a lot of art books. I feel like a bad artist sometimes because I haven't taken a big enough interest in that type of stuff. But I'm trying to kind of like branch out, and I feel like it's helping me get perspective on my work as well as other people's work, and kind of thinking about things differently. So it's really interesting to hear what he has to say about these exhibits, and just, yeah, his perspective, hearing someone else's perspective. And so it's just kind of broadening my way of looking at things in general. But yeah, it's really good so far. So I would highly suggest it.
Thank you. And if any of you want to put your Instagram handles or contact information in the chat, audience members can follow you and check out your work in more detail. But yeah, any other literary recommendations?
I have a few. I'm also in like my office, so I'm just like sitting around all of my books, and this is like one of my favorite things. So I'll start with this one. So this is a book. It's actually like a collection of look at me with this book. This is hilarious. It's a creative acts for curious people, and it's like a bunch of kind of series of prompts that are applicable to any medium that you can do. Like this is like frame and concept, and like it's kind of gives you like an idea of something to do. So they're like kind of like fun ways to like, I don't know, if you're like unsure how you're gonna spend your studio day, to like jolt something, to maybe find new ways in or new ways out. It's really big, and there's literally like each one's only like 2 pages long. And I have questions about like how this was compiled and who gets credit for it, but I think that it's a really great book. And then this other book I have is that I really like. I'm a movement artist, but I love design books because I'm just like designing space and shapes and bodies really to tell stories. So this book, which is Design is Storytelling, I absolutely love it because it like, asks a lot of questions about things like, why did you choose yellow? Like really simple things. And it also it talks about all kinds of, it's really inspiring to me. And even just like the way that they design space, about hot spots in the room, or like, I don't know. This is a great book. There's a lot of really pretty pictures, and it has a good flow, so it's not dense. And then also I'm trying to be quick because I could really keep going, but Belonging, A Culture of a Place. This is Bell Hook's book that I really like, because I'm interested in spaces, but this is like one, it's about like a lot of things like reclaiming and paths, and I think that it comes from like a different perspective, but I feel like it's like you can constantly reevaluate and think about it from an artist perspective, and then also just like in relationship to like other people's experiences. So
Thank you.
those are some of my favorites
Awesome.
right now.
Awesome. And Kenaim, did you have any books?
Sure, yeah, I'll list out a couple real quick. I mean,
Yeah.
perennial favorite of mine is always Interaction of Color by Joseph Albers. I think it's a real, real straightforward cause and effects of color theory instead of more things that are based around what people think other people think about. It's a much more, hey, when you put these things two together with these two colors together, they vibrate like this. When you do this, it looks like this. So real good knowledge right there. I think Stephen King on writing is always a great resource for any creative person. The processes might be different, but I think the ways in which you go about stuff is similar. And maybe the last thing that I would think of is Sculpting in Time by Andrei Tarkovsky, who is a filmmaker that was alive a few decades ago, and it's about the role of an artist with themselves as far as what an artist is even doing, creating art. It has lots of ideas about art's attachment to the soul and the place of an artist in society. So
Awesome. Love his films. Very cool. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I think our conversation was really enriching, and I hope you all found it informative and wonderful. I'm going to put a link in the chat for that will bring you to our other programs that are happening in Startup Phoenix. So there's 2 more panel discussion programs this month. The next one is on Thursday the 13th, and that's going to be the power of collaboration. We also have another arts program the week following on Wednesday, which is doing business in Phoenix with the Phoenix Office of Arts and Culture. And also our last panel discussion is going to be on April 27th. Same day and time, it's going to be being your own boss. So please register and check out those great programs as well. And we hope to see you there. And again, thank you all so much. And I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Nice meeting you all. Take care.
Nice meeting y'all too.
Thank you.